Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is October 15th, Tuesday, and for today headlines we have: Canada expels Indian diplomats, accusing them of criminal campaign. Attention Kmart shoppers, it's closing time. Lilly Ledbetter, the activist who inspired Fair Pay Act, dies at 86. Nobel Prize goes to 3 economists who study the wealth and poverty of nations. NASA spacecraft, it's on its way to Jupiter's Europa moon. Canada expels Indian diplomats, accusing them of criminal campaign. The Canadian police said the Indian government had orchestrated homicides and extortion in Canada to intimidate Sikh separatists. India, in return, kicked out Canadian diplomats. Canada accused the Indian government on Monday of homicide and extortion and tended to silence critics of India living in Canada, escalating a bitter dispute that began last year with an assassination of a Sikh activist. Canada expelled India's top diplomat and 5 others, saying they were part of a vast criminal network. India reciprocated, expelling 6 Canadian diplomats. The 2 countries had been in an immense dispute following the assassination of Canada of a prominent Sikh clerk, Harp Singh Nijjar. The government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said at the time that his killing had been orchestrated by the Indian government. Canada is home to the largest Sikh community outside India, where the religious minority lives mostly in the northwestern state of Punjab. The Indian government says that some Sikhs in Canada are actively involved in a secessionist movement that seeks to carve a Sikh homeland known as Khalistan out of India. Canadian officials said that their investigation had focused on the Indian government's involvement in a campaign aimed at Canadian Sikh activists. The breakdown in the relationship between the 2 countries has gone all the way to the top. Mr. Trudeau said on Monday that he had confronted his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, about the investigation last week in Laos, where both men were attending a summit. The Canadian leader said he had asked Mr. Modi for India's cooperation ahead of a meeting between national security officials from both countries in Singapore. The officials were to discuss the involvement of Indian diplomats and what the authorities have described as serious criminal activities against Sikhs in Canada. I impressed upon him that it needs to be taken very, very seriously, Mr. Trudeau told reporters in Ottawa at the news conference. Despite the one-on-one discussion between the leaders, the Singapore meeting did not produce the cooperation Canadian officials had sought, leading to diplomatic expulsions. We will never tolerate the involvement of a foreign government threatening and killing Canadian citizens on Canadian soil, a deeply unacceptable violation of Canada's sovereignty and of international law, Mr. Trudeau said. Melanie Joly, Canada's foreign minister, said that her country had issued the expulsion orders to the 6 diplomats after the Indian government refused to waive their diplomatic immunity and allow them to participate in the Canadian investigations. Among those kicked out was Sanjay Kumar Verma, India's highest commissioner or ambassador to Canada. Ms. Joly said that Canada's law enforcement agencies had identified the 6 as persons of interest in the Nijjar assassination. The decision to expel these individuals was made with great consideration, she said, adding that the investigators had gathered ample, clear, and concrete evidence. Mr. Nijjar was ambushed and killed by 3 masked men outside of a Sikh temple in Surrey, British Columbia. 3 Indian nationals have been arrested and charged to date. The Indian government, in its own statement on Monday, rejected Canada's account of what had happened to its diplomats. India said it had pulled them out of Canada because of an atmosphere of extremism and violence that put them in danger. The Indian government also said that it was expelling 6 Canadian diplomats from India, including the embassy's second highest ranking diplomat, the Charge d'Affaires, Stuart Wheeler. The Indian government had vehemently denied accusations that it was involved in Mr. Nijjar's killing and maintains that the allegations against it are politically motivated. It says that Mr. Trudeau is in cahoots with the Sikh separationists in Canada because they support his Liberal Party. A top Canadian law enforcement official, Mike Dooman, on Monday presented the accusations against the Indian government, saying it had set up a criminal network inside Canada to harass and intimidate Sikhs. He provided few specifics about the allegations, but said that the investigation had been aided by the FBI. An extraordinary situation is compelling us to speak about what has discovered in our multiple ongoing investigations into the involvement of agents of the government of India in serious criminal activity in Canada, said Mr. Dunheim, who is the head of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He said that the police were taking the unusual step of going public because of a significant threat to public safety in our country. Mr. Dunham said his officers has investigated and charged a significant number of individuals for their direct involvement in homicides, extortions, and other criminal acts of violence. He said that there have been more than a dozen credible threats to life against members of the Sikh community in Canada. The Indian government agents, including the 6 diplomats expelled, were based not just in Ottawa, the capital, but also in Vancouver and Toronto, and other cities across Canada where Sikhs live. While Mr. Dunheim did not detail the means the Canadian authorities had used to collect the evidence against the Indian government and its agents, he said the investigators had found that it was a running major intelligence gathering network in Canada. Some of those involved in the network were paid, he said, while others were coerced into helping. The information collected by the government of India is then used to target members of the South Asian community, Mr. Dunheim said. India's intelligence services have long been accused of directing the killings of opponents inside neighboring countries. Canada's accusations against India regarding the Najjar assassination have been bolstered by the findings of an American investigation into a similar, although unsuccessful, plot against a U.S.-based Sikh clerk. Last November, federal prosecutors in Manhattan said they had found connections between both plots. The deepening rift between India and Canada comes as the United States, the European Union, and other Canadian allies have been trying to court India as a counterweight to Russia. India is a booming middle power in the world stage, both in terms of defense and in trade and the economy. Mr. Trudeau said that he had informed his country's closest intelligence agencies about the developments. Together with Canada, the United States, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand make up the so-called Five Eyes Intelligence Cooperation Group. The accusations against India arise as a Canadian commission is investigating the interference of foreign powers into domestic politics. A Canadian parliamentary report in June, based on information provided by the country's intelligence services, identified China and India as the 2 countries that pose the biggest risk of foreign interference. Mr. Kumar Verma dismissed the report as politically motivated and dismissed its findings, and his government on Monday expressed a full support for him. The aspirations cast on him by the government of Canada are ludicrous and deserve to be treated with such contempt, it said. Attention Kmart shoppers, it's closing time. At the last full-size Kmart in the continental United States prepares to close, shoppers reminisced about the store that once sold everything, everywhere. When Chrissy Akamos and Gloria McCurtney heard that the last full-size Kmart in the mainland United States was closing down, they knew they had to pay their respects, even if the store was more than 1,300 miles away. As the shelves were quickly emptying at the Kmart in Bridgehampton, New York, the 2 sisters remembered the one in Duluth, Minnesota, where they both grew up. They went to the store as children in the 1980s with their mother and grandmother, who wrote poetry in the Kmart cafe. When they got their driver's license, they killed time by wandering the aisles as teenagers. Miss Ekanos brought her first pregnancy test there, and once they had their own children, the sisters would escape to Kmart for their mom breaks. We would regret it if we didn't come, Miss McCourtney, 39, said. Kmart was once America's leading discount store, famous for its blue light specials for in-store customers. Attention Kmart shoppers became a catchphrase uttered by Johnny Carson and Beetlejuice. Now at the Bridgehampton store, the announcement seemed stuck in a pandemic-era time warp. Shoppers were asked to stay safe by masking up and social distancing. After decades of decline, Kmart has now largely disappeared. Living on in comedy bits are classic films like Rain Man, where Dustin Hoffman's character only gets his boxer shorts at Kmart in Cincinnati. The closure of the store in Bridgehampton October 20th will leave just one small store in Miami, crammed into what was once the garden center of a much larger Kmart, and a handful on Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The news of the Bridgehampton closure drew lapsed and loyal customers alike back to the store's drab interior, not just for the liquidation sale, everything must go, but also to mourn and reminisce. Some shoppers honored the store by milling the aisles, while others filled their carts with discounted cologne, LOL surprise sticker books, and household products. Online, Kmart fans have long been eulogizing the retailer on Facebook in the Kmart subreddit. "It's just this weird nostalgia for us," said Miss McCourtney, who was wearing Kmart Joe boxer leggings and shares half of the Kmart Forever tattoo on her forearm with a friend. When she imagines something peaceful, she thinks of wandering Kmart. "Walking the aisles of Kmart just made me so calm and happy," Miss McCourtney said. She looked at her sister, adding, "Probably because I was always doing it with you." Everything must go. One recent Wednesday afternoon, customers streamed in and out of the Bridgehampton Kmart, past the yellow signs with thick red letters shouting, "Everything must go, store closing sale," and nothing held back. Customers carried mesh bags of firewood and handfuls of sponges, or push carts full of toilet paper. They asked one another about the sales inside and swapped stories about how handy Kmart was for greeting cards, layaways, and small gifts to take to someone's house over the holidays or for parties. Jake Berry took a picture of a Thomas the Tank Engine keychain in front of the store's exterior, with a big red K in the background. "They had the best toy section," Mr. Berry, 22, said. "They always had exclusive Thomas train sets." Mr. Berry regularly shopped at Kmart as a child with his mother, and used his day off from Barnes & Noble to travel from Islip, New York, to bid farewell, he said. "Boy, they're knocking down fast," said Jerry McWhinney, 80, as she loaded stocking stuffers, cat food, and other items into the trunk of her car. Like many local customers, Miss McWhinney, who lives in Southampton, wonders what will move into the nearly 90,000 square foot space. Bridgehampton, on the Tony Eastern end of Long Island, one of the country's most expensive zip codes, doesn't have any other big box stores. The closest Walmart and Target are at least 45-minute drive away. "This was really the only place it felt like you could kind of get affordable clothes," said Dana Kessel, 46, who grew up in Sag Harbor and saw shirts she bought from Kmart 10 years ago. "Public transportation comes here, which is kind of a big deal. It's hard to get that to go anywhere." Inside, closeout sale posters overwhelmed the store. Pop music from the 1980s and 90s played over the speakers. Customers strolled past discounted Kenmore washing machines, dryers, refrigerators, and dishwashers on the display floor. An empty area, quartered off by yellow caution tape, had missing tiles where patches of dirt floor remained, and bare mannequins stood stashed together. Shoppers scribbled in the layers of dust that caked a Craftsman YT3000 red lawnmower sitting out near the pet clothes with a yellow "sold" sticker on it. They debated whether the prices might drop. Chris O'Brien, 63, a retired schoolteacher from Center Morchises, picked up a cinnamon-scented pine cones, raisin chocolate, and Montreal steak seasoning as Bruce Springsteen songs played from his phone. Mr. O'Brien looked at a winter hat marked 50% off. "It's kind of like playing the stock market," he said, putting the hat back. "Hold out for the cheaper prices or risk items settling out." Some customers asked store employees about couches on sale, while others asked what would happen to their jobs. Among those inquiring, Stella Capasso. "It's very sad. A lot of people work here," said Miss Capasso, a retired teacher in her 70s. Miss Capasso stood at the entrance to the store, the back of the corner which appeared dimly lit and barren. "It kind of sets the tone," she added. "So many of the stores from her childhood have closed." Transform Co., Kmart's parent company, did not respond to requests for comment from the New York Times. A Kmart manager said the staff were not authorized to speak with the Times when a reporter and photographer visited the store on October 2nd. Once unstoppable, a chain became understocked and understaffed. The first Kmart opened in 1962 in Garden City, Michigan, though the company's roots go back much farther, to a chain of S.S. Krieger variety stores that started in Michigan in in 1899. Kmart's quickly spread across the country by offering everything from food to fashion, according to Mark A. Cohen, former chief executive of Sears Canada. They grew to be an enormous feature in retailing back in the day, Mr. Cohen said. By 1986, Kmart has become the country's leading discounter and its second largest retailer behind Sears. Kmart fell victim to executive mismanagement, Mr. Cohen said, and failed to compete with Walmart's low prices, Target's stylish branding, and later, the rise of Amazon. Once an unstoppable giant that carried brands that included Martha Stewart and Jaclyn Smith, Kmart's stores became understocked, understaffed, and neglected. In 2002, Kmart, which had 2,114 stores and 240,000 employees, filed for bankruptcy, at the time the largest ever filing for a retailer. In 2005, Kmart merged with Sears, also in rapid decline. The move nearly wiped out both brands. Sears Holding, their parent company, filed for bankruptcy in 2018, and Kmart continued shuttering its stores. Nostalgia for Kmart's heyday set in as the company collapsed. In 2015, fans swooned over the release of 4 years' worth of in-store music and announcements that were preserved by a former employee, Mark Davis, and uploaded to archive.org. It is the final chapter in the great American story of success and failure, Mr. Cohen, the former executive, said. The mannequins are not for sale. After an hour and a half of shopping, at around 5:15, Miss Akamos and Miss McCourtney joined the checkout line. They did not find any Jaclyn Smith or Joe Boxer clothes, and despite their request, store associates told the sisters they were not allowed to buy the arm or hand off of one of the bare Kmart mannequins. Still, the pair found plenty: a grown aquarium, ninja tattoos, mittens, and a fishing lure. Miss McCourtney felt a rush when she typed in her phone number to earn her Shop Your Way loyalty Kmart points. She spent $75.22 and saved $70 with points. Miss Akamo spent $35 and saved $31. What they'll get for their remaining loyalty points is anyone's guess, but one thing was clear from the flyers around the store and the receipts in their hand: all sales were final. Lilly Ledbetter, the activist who inspired Fair Pay Act, dies at 86. Lilly Ledbetter, a women's equality activist who fight for pay equity, led to passage of the monumental Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, died Saturday. She was 86. Ledbetter's death was confirmed on Monday by Jody Solomon, her speaking manager. She was fierce, she was a crusader, and just a really good friend. She will be missed a lot, Solomon told NPR. Born in Jacksonville, Alabama, Ledbetter was hired as a supervisor at the Goodyear tire plant in Gadsden, Alabama, in 1979. Years later, she discovered through an anonymous note left in her mailbox that she was receiving less pay than her male coworkers who worked the same position. When I saw that, it took my breath away. I felt humiliated. I felt degraded, Ledbetter recalled in an interview with NPR in 2009. I had to sort of get my composure back to go ahead and perform my job. And then, the first day off, I went to Birmingham, Alabama, and filed a charge with the EEOC. That action in 1998 was the beginning of a 10-year legal fight for Ledbetter's towards equality. She retired from Goodyear 11 months after she found out about the pay disparity and filed a gender discrimination lawsuit against the company in 1999. She won the suit in 2003 and was awarded more than $3 million, but the amount was reduced to $300,000 because of a statutory cap and a $60,000 in back pay. Goodyear appealed the decision to the Supreme Court, arguing that Ledbetter could only win damages or back pay for the 180 days prior to the filing of her claim. In 2007, the High Court agreed in a 5-4 ruling. In her dissent, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said Ledbetter's case is not time-barred and wrote the issue is in Congress's court. Less than 2 years later, Congress passed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, which amended the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and allows workers to obtain relief, including recovery of back pay, for up to 2 years preceding the filing of the charge. Then, President Barack Obama signed the measure into law in January 29, 2009, the first bill he signed as president. Obama paid a tribute to Ledbetter in a statement on Sunday. Lilly Ledbetter never set out to be a trailblazer or a household name. She just wanted to be paid the same as a man for her hard work, he wrote. Lilly did what so many Americans before her have done, setting her sights high for herself and even higher for her children and grandchildren. Michelle and I are grateful for her advocacy and her friendship, and we send our love and prayers to her family and everyone who's continuing the fight she began. Ledbetter has been recognized for her advocacy on pay equity, and her story continues to resonate. Last week, Ledbetter was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award from Advertising Week for her activism on equal pay. Lily, a movie based on Ledbetter's life, is being shown at screenings across the country. Nobel Prize goes to 3 economists who studied the wealth and poverty of nations. The wealth and poverty of nations has been a preoccupation of economists since Adam Smith founded the discipline 250 years ago when he wrote a book titled The Wealth of Nations. This year's Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 men who traced the institutional roots of national prosperity by exploring the vastly different outcomes in former European colonies. Darren Acemoglu and Simon Johnson from MIT and James Robinson of the University of Chicago will share the prize, worth about $1.58 million, for helping to explain how the different institutions in those former colonies continue to shape economic fortunes today. Rather than asking whether colonialism is good or bad, we note that different colonial strategies had led to different institutional patterns that have persisted over time, Acemoglu said during a news conference in Stockholm where the prize was awarded. By coincidence, the announcement came on a U.S. holiday that honors both the European explorer Christopher Columbus and the indigenous people of the New World. Colonies where a large share of settlers survived tended to establish inclusive democratic institutions and subsequently prospered, the prize-winning researchers found. Those where relatively few settlers survived often formed more autocratic, extractive institutions and ended up languishing. Democratic versus autocratic nations. The findings are generally pro-democracy, said Acemoglu, who along with Robinson co-authored the book, Why Nations Fail, but he added democracy is not a panacea. Introducing democracy is very hard, Acemoglu said. When you introduce elections, that sometimes creates conflict, and in particular, in already polarized societies, elections can lead to short-lived outcomes that are sometimes not democratic in nature. China, meanwhile, has grown to become one of the world's second-largest economy and lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, despite its autocratic governing system. Acemoglu argued that the autocratic governments can boost growth temporarily by pouring resources into favored industries, but that tends to be hard to sustain. He acknowledged democracies don't always deliver on their potential for widespread prosperity. He pointed to survey data showing support for democracy is at an all-time low. Democracies are going through a rough patch, Acemoglu said, and it is in some sense quite crucial that they reclaim the high ground of better governance, cleaner governance, and delivering sort of a promise of democracy to a broad range of people. NASA's spacecraft is on its way to Jupiter's Europa moon. A spacecraft that will study one of Jupiter's moons launched Monday on a journey of more than 6 years to discover if the moon has the ability to support life. The solar-powered spacecraft Europa Clipper ascended above clear skies through Earth's atmosphere on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's expected to reach Jupiter in April 2030 to study Europa, the icy surfaced moon, which is roughly the size of Earth's moon and thought to have ingredients for life, such as water, NASA says. Europa could have all the ingredients for life as we know it, NASA Associate Administrator Jim Free said on a media call on Sunday. Water, organics, chemical energy, and stability. What we discover at Europa will have profound implications for the study of astrobiology and how we view our place in the universe. The spacecraft has 3 goals, according to the agency, which are to determine the thickness of the moon's icy shell and its interactions with the ocean below, to investigate its composition, and to characterize its geology. Europa Clipper is carrying 9 science instruments, including 2 that will catch dust and gas, and has a gravity experiment that uses telecommunication systems, the agency says. Weighing 13,000 pounds, almost half of which is fuel, Europa Clipper has 24 engines and is about the length of a basketball court when its solar arrays are open. The spacecraft is expected to reach Mars in February 2025 and swing back to Earth in 2026 to give Europa Clipper just enough energy to reach Jupiter, using the planet's gravity, NASA says. Once the spacecraft reaches Jupiter in 2030, it will orbit the planet and begin making 49 close flybys of Europa in the spring of 2031, according to NASA. Europa Clipper will face a challenge once it reaches the planet's moon, exposure to radiation, since the moon is within Jupiter's magnetic field. To combat this, the spacecraft's electronics will be enclosed in a thick vault lined with aluminum and titanium aimed as a shield against radiation. Europa Clipper will spend less than a day in the radiation zone and then leave, repeating the process 2 or 3 weeks later, according to NASA. The mission is scheduled to end in 2034, with Europa Clipper crash landing on another one of Jupiter's moons, Ganymede. And that is all that we have for today. Thank you so much. Bye!